Major Sophia Reyes stood at the edge of the Fort Braxton training grounds, watching younger officers struggle through tactical exercises she could complete with her eyes closed. At 34, with her slender build and soft features that seemed at odds with military expectations, she kept her dark hair tied back in a simple bun and never wore even a hint of makeup on the field. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Her temporary instructor uniform hung loose on her petite frame. The specialist consultant badge pinned to her chest practically screamed that she didn't belong. For 2 weeks now, she'd been the ghost in the operation. While others barked orders, she took notes. While they debated strategy, she observed. While they showcased their physical prowess, she remained in the background. The other officers had started talking about her from the very first day. Their whispers followed her like persistent shadows across the training grounds. This wasn't just any military operation. This was the Joint Special Operations Command Training Initiative, where only the most distinguished officers were selected to develop next-generation battlefield protocols. Every person here had earned their spot through combat experience, advanced tactical degrees, or exceptional leadership records. But Sophia had simply appeared one morning with paperwork none of them had seen before, and she never discussed her background. During breaks, she'd sit alone under the shade of a distant oak tree, writing in a small digital tablet that she kept closely guarded. Her movements were efficient, precise, but never flashy. When senior officers issued directives, she followed them without hesitation, but there was something in her eyes, a distance, like she was processing information on multiple levels that others couldn't access. The morning that would transform everything started like any other. Sophia was checking equipment at the supply tent, reviewing inventory logs before the day's simulation, when she heard familiar laughter behind her. 3 female captains were clustered together, stealing glances in her direction. The tallest one, a redhead named Captain Victoria Blackwell, with perfectly applied eyeliner even under the morning sun, wasn't trying to keep her voice down. "What's she even doing here?" Blackwell said loudly enough for half the staging area to hear. "Seriously, look at her. It's like she's researching a role for some military drama." The other women laughed, emboldened by Blackwell's boldness. A brunette captain named Diana Chen joined in. "I bet she can't even carry standard field gear. She'd probably collapse after 100 yards. Their laughter grew more pointed, more deliberate. Sophia continued examining the equipment logs, her face revealing nothing, but her hands moved with the same steady precision they always did. She wasn't rushing. She wasn't slowing down. She just kept working. A group of male officers had gathered nearby, drawn by the commotion. One of them, a broad-shouldered man named Major Scott Wilson, with commendation ribbons lining his chest, studied Sophia like she was an equation with missing variables. "No, but really," he said, crossing his muscular arms. "Who approved her for this program? Someone's niece getting special treatment?" His comment drew nods from the others. Another officer, younger with a freshly shaved head that gleamed in the morning light, shook his head in disapproval. "This is supposed to be elite tactical development. We're talking about national security protocols here. And they bring in someone who looks like she belongs in a university classroom." Sophia finished with the inventory logs and turned to walk toward the command center. As she passed the group, she could feel their eyes following her, measuring her, finding her wanting. But she'd felt those looks before. She'd felt them her entire career. What they didn't know, what nobody at this base knew, was that Sophia had been handpicked by General Eleanor Westbrook for Operation Kingfisher 4 years ago, an operation so classified that officially it never existed. Sovereign Shield was what they called it. And only 8 people in the entire government knew the full scope of what it entailed. 8 people went into the field. Only 2 came back. Sophia still jolted awake some nights hearing the voices of the 6 who didn't make it home. Still felt their absence like phantom limbs she'd learned to function without. But she carried their memory with her everywhere. Preserved permanently in the Presidential Medal of Honor, she kept in a simple leather case, nestled in her personal belongings where no one could see it unless she chose to reveal it. As she walked toward the command center, Sophia could sense the tension building behind her. Today felt different. Today, someone was going to push too far, and the careful distance she'd maintained for 2 weeks was about to collapse. The morning sun beat down with unforgiving intensity, promising a day that would test everyone's resolve. Around her, other officers prepared for the day's simulation, checking equipment and reviewing tactical plans. Word had spread that today's exercise would determine who would lead the next phase of protocol development and who would be reassigned. Sophia found her designated position and waited for instructions, just as she had for the past 2 weeks. But deep down, she knew that by sunset, everything would be different. The question wasn't whether her identity would be revealed. It was whether she was prepared for what would happen when it was. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Colonel Richard Hargrove strode onto the field with the assurance that came from decades of command. At 42, he was in his prime, physically imposing with a reputation for tactical brilliance and uncompromising standards. His uniform was immaculate, his posture perfect, his expression stern but controlled. He'd been observing Sophia for weeks, and it was clear he'd made his judgment. She was an administrative oversight, a bureaucratic appointment, someone who needed to be weeded out before she compromised the integrity of his training program. Hargrove had built his career on identifying weaknesses in military systems, and everything about Sophia's presence screamed vulnerability to him. Her size, her quietness, her apparent lack of assertiveness, all red flags to a man who valued traditional military attributes above all else. "Attention!" Hargrove shouted, his voice carrying across the field with practiced authority. Everyone snapped to formation, including Sophia, who moved with a fluidity that would have impressed anyone watching closely. But Hargrove wasn't looking for competence. He was looking for a problem to solve. His eyes swept the assembled officers and landed precisely where everyone expected them to. "Major Reyes," he barked. Front and center. Sophia stepped forward without hesitation. She didn't question why. She didn't look around for support. She just moved, her boots making little sound despite her brisk pace. When she reached Hargrove, she stood at attention, her eyes focused on a point just past his shoulder. The entire field had fallen silent. This felt like a confrontation everyone had been anticipating, whether they admitted it or not. Hargrove circled her slowly, deliberately, like a predator assessing potential prey. "Tell me something, Major," he said, his voice projecting for everyone to hear. "What exactly qualifies you to be part of my tactical development team?" He gestured dismissively at her uniform, at the specialist consultant badge pinned to her chest. "This isn't a consulting firm. This isn't a think tank. This is the United States military, and we're developing protocols that will determine life or death in the field." Sophia remained at attention, her breathing even, her expression professional, but inside, she was calculating. She'd faced interrogations before, situations where the wrong answer meant mission failure. This was just another test, another moment where she had to decide how much to reveal. Hargrove was only beginning. "Look around you," he continued, raising his voice to ensure everyone could hear clearly. "Every officer on this field has earned their place through combat experience, tactical expertise, or distinguished service. They've led units in active war zones. They've made decisions under fire." He stopped directly in front of her, close enough that she could detect the faint scent of his aftershave. "But you just appeared 2 weeks ago with paperwork from some Pentagon office, and now you think you have something to contribute to Special Operations Protocol development?" The crowd was growing. Other instructors had noticed the confrontation and were moving closer to observe. Some of the officers looked uncomfortable with the public nature of this dressing down. But none intervened. This was military hierarchy in action. You didn't question a superior officer making his point, even if that point felt excessively personal. Sophia could sense the shifting energy around her, the way people positioned themselves for a better view. She'd faced more dangerous situations, confronted more lethal adversaries, but there was something uniquely unpleasant about this public humiliation. "The officers standing on this field have proven themselves," Hargrove said, his voice rising with each sentence. "They've demonstrated their value to this country through action, not paperwork. They've shown their worth through leadership, not observation." He paused dramatically, making sure everyone could hear his next words. "And you think you deserve to stand among them? Because why exactly? Because someone in Washington thought we needed a female perspective? Because someone wanted to check a diversity box? Still, Sophia said nothing. Her silence seemed to frustrate Hargrove even more. He was accustomed to getting reactions, to seeing people buckle under pressure. But Sophia just stood there, absorbing his words as if they were irrelevant background noise. Her calm was unsettling, almost provocative. It made Hargrove feel like he was performing for an audience that wasn't actually watching. That's when he decided to escalate. "You know what, Major Reyes," Hargrove said, stepping back so everyone could see them both clearly. "I don't think you belong in this program at all. In fact, I think you should stand down immediately. Pack your things and be on the next transport out of Fort Braxton by 1,800 hours." The words hung in the morning air like a physical presence. Even the instructors looked surprised. This was going beyond professional criticism or tough leadership. This was a public dismissal. A career-derailing action happening in front of dozens of witnesses. Sophia could feel hundreds of eyes on her, could sense phones being discreetly positioned to capture what was happening. This moment would be discussed in officer clubs and military forums for months. The day the female major was publicly dismissed from JSOC tactical development. But Sophia didn't protest. She didn't appeal to higher authority. She didn't look around for someone to intervene. Instead, she reached for the small leather case she kept in her breast pocket, the one item she carried with her at all times. The zipper made a soft sound that seemed impossibly loud in the silence. She removed a small object and held it in her palm, still at attention, still showing no emotion beyond professional courtesy. "Sir," she said, her voice clear and steady, speaking for the first time since the confrontation began. "Before I stand down, I believe there's something you should know about my qualifications." She opened her hand to reveal what she was holding. Not just any medal, but a Presidential Medal of Honor, its distinctive blue ribbon and gold star gleaming in the morning light. Not a replica, not a commemorative piece, but the actual medal, America's highest military honor, awarded for personal acts of valor above and beyond the call of duty. Hargrove had stopped talking. His mouth was still open, as if the words he'd been about to say had evaporated somewhere between his brain and his vocal cords. Around the field, conversations ceased mid-sentence. People who had been leaning in to witness Sophia's humiliation suddenly found themselves stepping back unconsciously, creating distance between themselves and something they hadn't expected to encounter. That's when the sound of purposeful footsteps approached from behind, heavy, measured, carrying the unmistakable authority of high command. General Marcus Sullivan had been observing from the command center, initially just monitoring routine training, but when he saw Hargrove publicly dismissing an officer in the middle of the field, he set down his coffee and started walking. Sullivan was a legend in military circles. 35 years of service, 4 combat tours, commendations from NATO, the UN, and every branch of the armed forces. He didn't get excited easily, and he didn't get surprised often. But when he saw the Presidential Medal of Honor in Sophia Reyes' hand, Sullivan felt something he hadn't experienced in decades. Recognition, and with it, a cold understanding of just how catastrophically Hargrove had miscalculated. Sullivan's voice, when he finally spoke, carried across the training field like distant thunder. "Colonel Hargrove," he said, each word precisely measured. "Would you care to explain why you're dismissing the leader of Operation Sovereign Shield?" The silence that followed Sullivan's question was absolute. It was the kind of quiet that happens in moments of collective shock, when reality shifts so dramatically that everyone needs a moment to process the new information. Hargrove turned toward the general, his face cycling through confusion, recognition, and finally dawning horror. Sovereign Shield wasn't just a classified operation. It was the stuff of military legend, the kind of mission that got whispered about in secure briefing rooms, referenced in documents that required clearance levels most officers would never achieve. Sullivan continued walking until he was standing directly between Hargrove and Sophia. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered with iron-gray hair, but he moved with surprising grace for his size. His eyes never left Hargrove's face. "I asked you a question, Colonel," Sullivan said, his voice dangerously calm. "Major Reyes carries presidential authority under Joint Special Operations Command. She reports directly to the Secretary of Defense." He paused, letting the weight of that statement settle over the field. "So I'm asking you again, who gave you permission to dismiss this officer?" Hargrove's mouth opened and closed without producing sound. Around the field, people were starting to put pieces together. The older officers, the ones who had been in service long enough to remember classified operations from years past, were looking at Sophia with new understanding. They remembered hearing about Sovereign Shield in classified briefings. They remembered being told that the details were compartmentalized at the highest levels. What they hadn't known, what nobody had known, was that one of the surviving operatives was standing right here, disguised as a specialist consultant. Sophia herself hadn't moved. She stood at attention, the Medal of Honor resting in her palm, visible to everyone on the field. But her expression remained neutral, professional. She wasn't gloating. She wasn't even looking at Hargrove. Her eyes were focused on a point in the distance, as if this entire confrontation was just another operation she needed to complete. But inside, she was remembering. Remembering the night 4 years ago when she'd navigated through hostile territory for 18 hours to reach the extraction point. Remembering the weight of Captain Miguel Sanchez as she'd carried him the last mile even though he was barely holding on. Remembering the moment she'd realized that only she and Lieutenant James Foster would be making it home alive. That's when someone in the crowd made a critical error. Major Scott Wilson, the broad-shouldered officer who'd been mocking Sophia earlier, stepped forward with his chest puffed out. He was barely 30, fresh from tactical school with a theoretical understanding of special operations that hadn't yet been tested in reality, still convinced that confidence could substitute for experience. "With all due respect, General," Wilson said, his voice carrying an edge that suggested respect was the last thing he felt. "A medal doesn't automatically qualify someone to develop tactical protocols. For all we know, she could be some political appointment playing military hero." Sullivan's head turned toward Wilson with mechanical precision. It was the kind of movement that suggested barely contained rage. But before the general could respond, Wilson compounded his mistake. He strode toward Sophia, reaching for the Medal of Honor in her hand. "Let me see that," Wilson said, his fingers closing around the edge of the medal. "Anyone can get a replica. Anyone can pretend to be." Sophia moved. It happened so fast that most people missed exactly what she did. One moment, Wilson was reaching for her medal. The next, he was face down on the ground with his arm locked behind his back at an angle that made several observers wince. Sophia had pivoted, secured his wrist, redirected his momentum and used his own forward motion to drive him into the dirt. The entire sequence took perhaps 1.5 seconds. Wilson's face hit the ground with a dull thud. Sophia straightened up, carefully placing her Medal of Honor back in its leather case. Wilson groaned and tried to push himself up, but something in his shoulder wasn't responding correctly. 2 medics started jogging toward them from across the field. Sophia secured her medal case in her breast pocket and resumed her position at attention. Her breathing hadn't even changed. Sullivan observed this display with professional appreciation. He'd seen many combat techniques during his career, but what Sophia had just demonstrated went beyond standard military training. That was the kind of fluid, instinctive response that came from years of specialized instruction and real-world application. "Medics," he called out, gesturing toward Wilson. Then he turned back to the assembled crowd. "Anyone else have questions about Major Reyes's qualifications?" The field had gone so quiet you could hear the flag ropes tapping against the pole in the distance. People were staring at Sophia as if seeing her for the first time. The woman they had dismissed as weak, as out of place, as someone's political project, had just neutralized a trained officer without apparent effort. But Victoria Blackwell, the red-headed captain who had started the morning's mockery, wasn't ready to back down. She stepped forward, her face flushed with embarrassment and defiance. "Fine," she said, her voice unsteady but determined. "So she knows some combat moves, so she's got a medal. That doesn't change the fact that she's been lurking around this program for 2 weeks without contributing anything." Blackwell's voice grew stronger as she continued, fueled by the desperate need to salvage some fragment of pride. "She's just some decorated field officer. What does she know about developing tactical protocols for special operations?" Sophia's eyes shifted to Blackwell for the first time all morning. It was a subtle movement, just her gaze tracking from the horizon to focus on the other woman's face. But something about that look made Blackwell take an involuntary step backward. Without breaking eye contact, Sophia reached into her tablet case and pulled out a small data drive. Not the official documentation Sullivan was expecting to see, but something else entirely. She walked to a nearby display terminal where simulation data was projected and inserted the drive. The screen immediately lit up with a tactical analysis map covered in annotations and markings that could only have been made by someone with intimate knowledge of special operations strategy. The file was marked classified in red letters across the top, with security clearance requirements that made several of the senior officers lean in for a closer look. This tactical scenario, Sophia said, her voice quiet but carrying across the silent field without effort, has been the foundation of JSOC operations in the Andarko region for the past 14 months. She tapped a command, and the display showed the official mission parameters. According to current doctrine, the approach involves a two-team infiltration with air support on standby and an estimated casualty rate of 12.7%. Her voice was conversational, professional, but it commanded attention without requiring volume. She entered another command, and the display changed to show a completely different tactical approach. The problem is, she continued, as new strategic elements appeared on the screen, the current protocol is fundamentally flawed. She looked up from the display and made direct eye contact with Blackwell. This isn't theoretical criticism. I ran this exact scenario in the field. The operation your current protocols are based on. Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. 4 of my team members died because someone with insufficient field experience thought their theoretical model was superior to operational reality. The silence stretched out like a held breath. Sullivan moved closer to examine the display, his experienced eyes taking in Sophia's alternative approach. What she designed wasn't just a correction. It was a complete reimagining of the tactical problem, incorporating variables and contingencies that the original planners had overlooked entirely. This was about to become much more than a case of mistaken identity. Sullivan studied the display for a long moment, his expression growing more serious with each passing second. What Sophia had developed represented battlefield intelligence that could only come from direct experience. The kind of knowledge that saved lives, or, in this case, could have saved lives if it had been available sooner. He pulled out his secure phone and spoke into it quietly, using codes that most of the officers didn't recognize. Within minutes, official vehicles were pulling up to the edge of the training area. Men and women in formal uniforms stepped out, carrying secured tablets and wearing expressions that suggested this was now a matter of national security. One of them approached Sullivan and handed him a sealed envelope. The general opened it, read the contents, and nodded gravely. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice carrying the weight of official proclamation, "I have just received emergency directives from the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Effective immediately, Major Sophia Reyes is appointed as Director of Special Operations Tactical Development, with full authority over protocol implementation and operational planning." The words hit the field like a physical force. Director of Special Operations Tactical Development wasn't just a title. It was a position that put Sophia in charge of the very people who had been mocking her minutes earlier. She would be reviewing their performance, determining their fitness for continued service, making decisions about their careers and their futures. The irony was so acute it was almost painful to witness. Sophia accepted the appointment with the same calm professionalism she'd shown throughout the entire confrontation. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She didn't even look particularly surprised. She just nodded to Sullivan and said, "Thank you, sir. I'll do my best to implement effective protocols that minimize unnecessary casualties." But her first order of business was already clear. She turned to face the assembled officers, her eyes moving deliberately across their faces. When she spoke, her voice carried a new authority that made everyone stand straighter unconsciously. "The tactical scenarios you've been working with are based on incomplete intelligence and theoretical models," she said. "Starting tomorrow, we'll be implementing revised protocols based on actual field experience." She paused, letting that statement sink in. "The casualty rates for operations conducted under the current model are unacceptable. For those of you who continue with this program, you'll be developing tactics that have been proven effective in actual combat situations, not simulations. Methods that have been tested when real lives were at stake." Colonel Hargrove, who had been standing frozen in shock since Sullivan's arrival, finally found his voice. "Major, I didn't know if I had realized "You didn't know because you didn't ask," Sophia interrupted. "You made assumptions based on appearances, and those assumptions nearly cost you your career. In the field, that kind of mistake gets people killed." She turned to address the entire group. Military effectiveness depends on recognizing capability regardless of how it's packaged. If you can't identify competence when it's standing right in front of you, you're not ready for the kind of operations this program is designed to support. The weight of her words settled over the field like a heavy blanket. These weren't just philosophical observations. They were professional assessments that would determine who advanced and who was reassigned. Sullivan stepped forward. "Major Reyes will be conducting individual evaluations over the next 72 hours. Her recommendations will determine continued participation in this program." He paused, scanning the faces of the officers. "I suggest you demonstrate the kind of judgment and professionalism that should have been evident from the beginning." As the crowd began to disperse, Sophia could see the calculations happening behind their eyes. The power dynamic had shifted completely. The people who had dismissed her as weak now had to prove themselves worthy of her approval, but the real consequences were just beginning. Over the next few hours, as word of the morning's events spread throughout the base, careers began to crumble with surgical precision. Colonel Hargrove found himself facing an immediate inquiry into his conduct, with witnesses lining up to testify about his inappropriate behavior. Military regulations were clear about respect for superior officers, and Hargrove had unknowingly attempted to dismiss an officer with presidential authorization and Medal of Honor distinction. The inquiry board that convened that afternoon didn't need long to reach their conclusion. Hargrove's conduct violated multiple sections of the Uniform Code of Military Justice, and his complete failure to recognize the authority of a decorated operative raised serious questions about his judgment. By evening, his promising career was effectively over. Captain Victoria Blackwell discovered that her mockery of Sophia had been recorded by several officers' body cams and was already circulating through military command channels. The footage showing a captain publicly insulting a Medal of Honor recipient reached her commanding officers within hours. Blackwell's upcoming promotion was placed on indefinite hold, and she found herself reassigned to a desk position at the Pentagon, where her attitude would have fewer opportunities to compromise operational security. The transfer orders were marked extended duration with no specific end date mentioned. Major Scott Wilson, still nursing his injured shoulder, learned that assaulting a Medal of Honor recipient carried consequences that went far beyond military discipline. The medics had confirmed ligament damage that would require weeks of physical therapy, and every day of his recovery would serve as a reminder of how badly he'd misjudged the quiet woman in the standard uniform. His participation in the program was immediately terminated, and his security clearance was downgraded pending further review. The notation in his personnel file would follow him for the remainder of his military career. Captain Diana Chen and the other officers who had participated in the morning's harassment found themselves under investigation for conduct unbecoming. Their social media accounts were reviewed, their training records scrutinized, their fitness reports downgraded. The military didn't tolerate bullying under normal circumstances. But when that bullying was directed at a decorated officer whose service record included the highest honor the nation could bestow, the consequences became career-limiting. Sophia observed these developments with the same professional detachment she'd shown throughout the entire ordeal. She took no pleasure in seeing people's careers damaged, but she also understood that military discipline existed for a reason. In combat situations, the kind of snap judgments and prejudices that had been displayed that morning could get entire units killed. Better to identify and eliminate those weaknesses during training than to discover them when lives were on the line. But the most significant changes were yet to come. That evening, Sophia was summoned to a secure conference room where a video call was waiting. The faces on the screen represented the highest levels of military command, generals and admirals whose decisions shaped national security policy. "Major Reyes," the lead general began, "your handling of today's situation has been noted at the highest levels. The tactical analysis you provided has already been forwarded to JSOC headquarters for immediate implementation." He paused, consulting notes that weren't visible to Sophia. "Your recommendations will become standard protocol within 14 days. Sophia nodded in acknowledgement. "The current protocols would have resulted in unnecessary casualties, sir. Field experience should always take precedence over theoretical models." "Agreed," the general replied. Which brings us to our next point. We're offering you a permanent position as Director of Special Operations Tactical Development, with oversight across all branches of service. It was the kind of position that could shape military doctrine for years, the chance to ensure that future operators would have the benefit of hard-won knowledge, lessons learned through sacrifice and survival. Sophia considered the offer carefully. After 4 years of living with the weight of being one of only 2 survivors, the opportunity to prevent others from facing the same losses was almost irresistible. "I accept," she said finally, "but I want direct access to field teams implementing these protocols. Too many good people have died because someone in a conference room thought they knew better than the people actually doing the fighting." The general nodded with grim understanding. "Granted. You'll have full operational authority within your area of responsibility. The official appointment will be processed immediately." As the call ended, Sophia realized that the morning's humiliation had ultimately led to something she'd never expected: the chance to make a real difference in how special operations were planned and executed. The quiet woman who had been dismissed as weak had just been given the authority to reshape military tactical doctrine. The Presidential Medal of Honor in her breast pocket felt heavier now, weighted with new purpose. It wasn't just a symbol of past valor. It had become an instrument of future change. Within a week, Fort Braxton had transformed. Sophia's appointment as Director of Special Operations Tactical Development brought immediate and sweeping changes that rippled through every aspect of the training program. The first thing she did was replace the flawed Andarko region protocol that had cost her teammates their lives. The new tactical scenarios were based on actual combat experiences, incorporating the kind of real-world variables that theoretical planners often overlooked. Officers who had expected to cruise through familiar routines found themselves facing challenges that tested not just their physical abilities, but their capacity to think under pressure, to adapt when plans collapsed, and to make life-or-death decisions with incomplete information. The failure rate increased dramatically, but the quality of those who passed improved even more significantly. Sophia instituted a new evaluation system that prioritized practical application over theoretical knowledge. Officers were assessed on their ability to solve unforeseen problems, not their ability to recite protocols. The quiet ones, the observers, the people who might have been overlooked under the old system began to excel. But perhaps the most significant change was in the culture of the facility itself. The casual dismissiveness and arrogant attitudes that had characterized the program were replaced by a professional environment where competence was recognized regardless of appearance or background. Sophia made it clear that personal prejudices and snap judgments weren't just unprofessional, they were potentially lethal. In a series of briefings that became mandatory viewing for special operations trainers, she demonstrated how bias could lead to tactical disasters. "The enemy doesn't care about your preconceptions," she told one group of instructors. "They don't care if you think someone looks weak or strong, conventional or unusual. They care about effectiveness. And if you can't recognize capability when it's standing right in front of you, you're not qualified to train people whose lives depend on making accurate assessments." The message resonated. Competence would be recognized and rewarded, while prejudice would be identified and eliminated. The changes weren't popular with everyone. Some of the veteran instructors resented having their methods questioned. A few officers who had expected to advance based on connections or appearances found themselves failing evaluations they thought would be routine. But the results were undeniable. Within 4 months, teams trained under Sophia's protocols were completing operations with significantly lower casualty rates and higher mission success percentages. The Joint Chiefs took notice. Other military branches began requesting access to her revised protocols. Allied nations started sending their officers to observe her methods. The woman who had been dismissed as weak and unremarkable had become one of the most influential figures in special operations development. But for Sophia, the most meaningful change was more personal. She no longer woke up hearing the voices of her fallen teammates. Their sacrifice had been transformed into something that could save other lives, prevent other losses. She had found a way to honor their memory while building something better from the ashes of that failed mission. The quiet observer had become the architect of a new approach to tactical development, one that recognized that strength came in many forms, and that true competence was often hidden beneath unassuming exteriors, waiting for the right moment to emerge. One evening, as Sophia was reviewing new protocol drafts in her office, there was a knock at her door. "Come in," she called, not looking up from her work. The door opened to reveal Lieutenant James Foster, the only other survivor from Operation Sovereign Shield. At 32, with a prosthetic leg that replaced the limb he'd lost during their extraction, Foster moved with a determination that commanded respect. His eyes, once bright with youthful confidence, now carried the weight of experience that came from surviving when others hadn't. "I heard what you did with the tactical protocols," Foster said, closing the door behind him. "The Andarko operation changes. They're saying casualty projections are down almost 40%. Sophia gestured for him to take a seat. "They should be. We paid a high enough price for those lessons." Foster nodded, understanding in a way that only someone who had been there could. "I've been thinking about the others," he said quietly, "about what they would think of all this." Sophia set down her tablet, giving Foster her full attention. "Sanchez would have been the first to implement the new protocols," she said, a small smile touching her lips for the first time in what felt like years. "Remember how he was always telling us the standard procedures were going to get someone killed?" Foster laughed, a sound that held both joy and sorrow. He called headquarters the Theory Factory, said they wouldn't know actual combat if it landed in their morning coffee. They sat in companionable silence for a moment, remembering their fallen comrade. "Williams would have been skeptical," Foster continued. "She would have tested every new protocol herself before letting anyone on her team try it." Quote, "And Rivera would have found a way to improve it further," Sophia added. He never saw a plan he couldn't make better. More silence, filled with memories of people whose faces were growing dimmer with time but whose absence remained a constant presence. "I got the call yesterday," Foster said finally. "They're implementing your protocols across all Special Operations divisions. Not just JSOC anymore. Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines. Everyone's adopting them." Sophia nodded, unsurprised but satisfied. "It's what we owed them. To make sure it wasn't for nothing." Foster studied her for a long moment. "You know, when they told me you were going undercover at Fort Braxton, I thought they were making a mistake. Not because you weren't qualified, you're the most qualified person I know, but because I didn't think those traditionalists would ever see past their own biases." He gestured to her slight frame, her unassuming appearance. "I was wrong, and I'm glad I was wrong." Sophia smiled again, this time with genuine warmth. "Sometimes people need a dramatic demonstration before they can see what's been in front of them all along." Foster laughed. "Putting Major Wilson on his face in 2 seconds qualifies as dramatic." His expression grew more serious. "They're talking about you, you know. Throughout the Special Operations community, they're calling it the Reyes Doctrine. The idea that effective tactical development has to come from actual field experience, not theoretical models. That the people who've been in the fight know more than the people who've only studied it." Sophia shook her head, uncomfortable with the recognition. It shouldn't have taken a Medal of Honor for people to listen to common sense. "Maybe not," Foster agreed. "But sometimes that's what it takes to break through entrenched thinking. A symbol people can't ignore." He stood to leave. "The memorial service is next week. 4 years since we lost them. Will you be there?" Sophia nodded. "I wouldn't miss it. We carry them with us, but it's good to stand together and remember." After Foster left, Sophia returned to her work with renewed purpose. The protocols she was developing weren't just tactical documents. They were a living memorial to 6 people who had given everything for their country. Their legacy would be measured in the lives saved by lessons learned at terrible cost. The next morning, Sophia walked into the Tactical Development Center to find it unusually quiet. The officers who normally would have been working at their stations were gathered in the central briefing area, standing at attention. General Sullivan stood at the front of the room, his expression formal but with a hint of satisfaction. "Major Reyes," he said as she entered. "Perfect timing." Sophia came to attention, uncertain what was happening. "At ease, everyone," Sullivan said. "We're here for an announcement, not a formation." The officers relaxed slightly, but remained respectfully attentive. "As you all know," Sullivan continued, "Major Reyes has transformed our tactical development process over the past 4 months. The Andarko protocols, which have now been implemented across all Special Operations divisions, are projected to reduce casualty rates by 40%, while increasing mission success rates by 35%. He gestured to a display screen where statistical analyses showed the impact of Sophia's changes. These aren't theoretical projections. These are actual results from field implementations. Lives saved. Missions completed. Objectives achieved. The room was completely silent. The officers who had once questioned Sophia's presence were now looking at her with a mixture of respect and something that approached awe. What you may not know, Sullivan continued, is that Major Reyes has been simultaneously developing tactical protocols for 17 other operational theaters while managing this facility. He pressed a button, and the display changed to show a global map with markers indicating the areas where Sophia's protocols had been implemented. The Joint Chiefs have reviewed the results and have reached a unanimous decision. Sullivan turned to face Sophia directly. Major Reyes, effective immediately, you are promoted to the rank of Lieutenant Colonel. Furthermore, you are appointed as the founding director of the newly established Joint Tactical Development Command, with authority across all branches of the armed services. The announcement was met with a moment of stunned silence, followed by spontaneous applause. Even those who had initially resisted Sophia's changes couldn't deny the effectiveness of her methods. Sullivan handed Sophia a folder containing her promotion orders and appointment details. Congratulations, Lieutenant Colonel. Your new command is being established with headquarters at Fort Braxton. You'll have authority to select your staff from any branch of service. Your budget has been approved at the highest levels. Sophia accepted the folder, momentarily overwhelmed by the scope of what was being offered. Thank you, sir. I'm honored by the confidence placed in me. Sullivan lowered his voice so only she could hear. This isn't about confidence, Reyes. This is about results. You've saved lives. That's the only metric that ultimately matters. After the ceremony, as officers lined up to congratulate her, Sophia noticed Captain Diana Chen hanging back, clearly uncomfortable but determined. When the crowd thinned, Chen approached hesitantly. Colonel Reyes, she said, her voice carrying a formality that hadn't been present during their previous encounters. I wanted to congratulate you on your promotion. Sophia studied the younger officer. Chen had been part of the group mocking her that fateful morning, but unlike Blackwell and Wilson, she had kept a lower profile in the aftermath. Thank you, Captain, Sophia replied neutrally. Chen seemed to struggle with what she wanted to say next. I also wanted to apologize, she said finally, for my behavior when you first arrived. I made assumptions based on appearances, and I was wrong. Sophia considered Chen's words carefully. She had seen many apologies over the past 4 months, most of them motivated by self-preservation rather than genuine understanding. What have you learned, Captain? Sophia asked. It wasn't an accusation, but a genuine question. Chen looked surprised by the question but gave it serious thought. I've learned that effectiveness can't be judged by how someone looks or where they came from. That experience matters more than theory, that the quietest person in the room might be the one with the most to contribute. She paused, gathering her courage. I've learned that my assumptions nearly cost me the opportunity to learn from someone who could make me a better officer. Sophia nodded, satisfied with the answer. Those are valuable lessons, Captain. Many officers never learned them. She studied Chen more carefully. Despite her initial behavior, the captain had shown promise in the revised training programs. She had adapted quickly to the new protocols and had demonstrated an aptitude for innovative tactical thinking. I'm selecting staff for the new Joint Tactical Development Command, Sophia said. I need officers who can recognize capability regardless of its package. Officers who prioritize effectiveness over tradition. Officers who have learned from their mistakes. Chen's eyes widened as she realized what Sophia was suggesting. Are you offering me a position, Colonel? I'm offering you an opportunity, Captain. The question is whether you've truly learned enough to make the most of it. Chen straightened to attention. I have, Colonel, and I won't let you down. Sophia nodded. Report to Fort Braxton in 2 weeks. The work we'll be doing there will change how special operations are conducted for the next generation. As Chen left, clearly stunned by this unexpected turn in her career, Sophia reflected on the changes of the past few months. She had transformed tactical development, but perhaps more importantly, She had transformed how capability was recognized and evaluated. The next morning, Sophia found herself in the Secretary of Defense's office in Washington. The spacious room, with its view of the Pentagon courtyard, felt far removed from the dusty training fields of Fort Braxton. Secretary Elizabeth Harrison, the first woman to hold the position, studied Sophia with thoughtful eyes. "Your promotion has caused quite a stir, Colonel," Harrison said, gesturing for Sophia to take a seat. "Not everyone is comfortable with the level of authority you've been given." Sophia sat with perfect posture, her newly updated uniform crisp and precise. "Change is rarely comfortable, Madam Secretary." Harrison smiled. "Indeed, but the results speak for themselves. The preliminary field reports showing the effectiveness of your protocols have silenced most critics." She leaned forward, her expression growing more serious. "Tell me about Operation Sovereign Shield. Not the classified details, but what you learned from it that's informing your approach now." Sophia considered the question carefully. "I learned that theoretical planning without field validation costs lives. I learned that assumptions about terrain, about enemy capabilities, about our own operators can be fatal. But most importantly, I learned that the people actually doing the fighting often have insights that never reach the people making the decisions." Harrison nodded, understanding immediately. "And that's what your Joint Tactical Development Command will address?" "Yes, ma'am. We're creating a direct pipeline from operational experience to tactical development. Every protocol will be developed by people who have actually implemented similar operations in the field. Every training scenario will be based on real-world encounters. Every decision will be validated by the people whose lives depend on getting it right." Harrison studied Sophia for a long moment. "You know, when your name first came across my desk for this position, there was resistance. People questioned whether someone so young, someone with your particular background, could effectively lead a command of this significance." Sophia waited, knowing there was more. "I told them to look at the Medal of Honor citation, to read the after-action report from Sovereign Shield, to review the results from Fort Braxton." The question stopped rather quickly. Harrison stood, signaling the end of the meeting. "The President will be announcing the formation of Joint Tactical Development Command at tomorrow's press conference. He's requested your presence." Sophia rose to her feet. "Of course, Madam Secretary." "One last thing, Colonel," Harrison said as Sophia prepared to leave. "The changes you're implementing aren't just tactical, they're cultural. You're challenging deeply entrenched assumptions about what leadership looks like, about who gets to make decisions that affect lives on the ground." She fixed Sophia with an appraising look. "That kind of change makes people uncomfortable. Be prepared for resistance, even with your record of success." Sophia nodded, unsurprised by the warning. "With respect, Madam Secretary, I've been facing that kind of resistance my entire career. The difference now is that I have the authority to do something about it." Harrison smiled, a genuine expression of approval. "That's precisely why you were selected, Colonel." "Carry on." The presidential press conference the next day was a blur of cameras, reporters, and formal announcements. Sophia stood at attention behind the president as he announced the formation of the Joint Tactical Development Command, describing it as a revolutionary approach to ensuring our special operations forces have the most effective, field-validated tactical protocols possible. When he invited her to the podium to make a brief statement, Sophia spoke with the same quiet authority that had transformed Fort Braxton. The Joint Tactical Development Command has one primary mission: to ensure that the men and women implementing special operations have the benefit of the best possible tactical guidance. Not theories developed in isolation, but protocols created by people who understand the realities of the battlefield. Our success will be measured in lives saved and missions accomplished. The questions from reporters focused mainly on the unprecedented nature of the command, its cross-service authority, its direct reporting structure to the Secretary of Defense, its mandate to revise long-established protocols. Sophia answered each question with precision and clarity, neither overstating nor understating the significance of the changes being implemented. But it was her response to the final question that would be quoted in military publications for years to come. "Colonel Reyes," a veteran military correspondent asked, "some have suggested that your rapid rise and the extensive authority you've been given is more about political symbolism than military necessity. How do you respond to that criticism? The room went silent. The question directly challenged not just Sophia's qualifications, but the integrity of the entire command structure that had promoted her. Sophia looked at the reporter without a trace of defensiveness. Results aren't symbolic, she said simply. Reduced casualty rates aren't symbolic. Increased mission success isn't symbolic. The only relevant question is whether our operators are better prepared and more effective because of the protocols we're developing. The data answers that question conclusively. She paused, then added, in special operations, effectiveness is the only metric that matters. Everything else is distraction. As the press conference ended and Sophia prepared to return to the Pentagon, she found General Sullivan waiting for her in the corridor. Nicely handled, he said, falling into step beside her. Direct and uncompromising, just like your protocols. Sophia nodded her thanks. The Joint Chiefs have finalized your command structure, Sullivan continued. You'll have deputy directors from each service branch, all reporting directly to you. Your budget has been approved at the level you requested. Your facility at Fort Braddock will be operational within 30 days. He handed her a tablet containing the relevant documents. This is unprecedented, you know. No one has ever been given this level of cross-service authority for tactical development. You'll be rewriting how special operations are conducted across the entire military. Sophia accepted the tablet, feeling the weight of responsibility it represented. It's what we owe them, she said quietly. The ones who paid the ultimate price because our protocols weren't good enough. Sullivan nodded, understanding immediately. The memorial service is tomorrow, isn't it? 4 years since Sovereign Shield. Yes, sir. Will you be attending? Sophia looked at him directly. Every year, sir. It's where this all began. The memorial service was a small, private affair. No press, no public announcements, just a gathering of those who knew the truth about Operation Sovereign Shield. The families of the fallen, the senior officers who had planned the mission, and the 2 survivors who carried the memory of their teammates with them every day. The simple memorial stone listed only 6 names without explanation or detail. The operation remained classified at the highest levels, its true purpose known to only a handful of people. But the sacrifice it represented was honored nonetheless. As Sophia placed a single white rose at the base of the memorial, she felt Lieutenant Foster step up beside her. They would be proud, he said quietly, of what you've built from what we lost. Sophia nodded, unable to speak for a moment. She thought of Captain Miguel Sanchez, who had questioned the original tactical plan until his final breath. Of Lieutenant Sarah Williams, who had saved 3 teammates before being killed herself. Of Sergeant David Rivera, whose innovative thinking had gotten them through the initial phase of the operation. They had given everything, and now their sacrifice would ensure that others would have a better chance of coming home. The President announced your command yesterday, Foster continued. It was all over the news. Revolutionary approach to tactical development, they called it. Sophia smiled faintly. Sanchez would say it's just common sense, that we should have been doing it this way all along. He would, Foster agreed, but it took someone like you to make it happen. Someone who saw the problem clearly and had the courage to change it. As they stood together in silent remembrance, Sophia reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From the quiet observer at Fort Braxton to the commander of a revolutionary new approach to special operations. From being dismissed and underestimated to being granted unprecedented authority to implement change. The Medal of Honor in her pocket was more than a recognition of past valor. It had become a key that unlocked possibilities for saving future lives. A symbol that had opened doors that might otherwise have remained closed. But it was what she did with that opportunity that would ultimately matter. The protocols she developed. The lives she saved. The operations that succeeded because of lessons learned at terrible cost. That would be the true legacy of Operation Sovereign Shield. Not just the memory of sacrifice, but the transformation of that sacrifice into something that protected others. A living memorial more powerful than any stone with names carved upon it. And as Sophia prepared to depart for her new command, she carried that responsibility with the same quiet determination that had characterized her entire career. The mission continued. The work remained. the obligation to honor those who had fallen by protecting those who still served. The underestimated major with the Presidential Medal of Honor had found her true purpose, and the military would never be the same. Fort Braddock rose like a fortress of innovation amid the rolling Virginia countryside. 18 months after its establishment, the Joint Tactical Development Command had grown from a revolutionary concept into the beating heart of special operations evolution across all military branches. The sleek, modern facility with its state-of-the-art simulation centers and secure development labs represented a fundamental shift in how America prepared its most elite forces. Lieutenant Colonel Sophia Reyes stood in the observation deck overlooking the main tactical development floor. Below her, teams of officers from every branch of service worked seamlessly together, developing and testing protocols that would save lives in the world's most dangerous places. The traditional rivalries between services had given way to a culture of collaborative excellence, where ideas were evaluated solely on their merit, regardless of their source. "Quite a view, isn't it?" said a voice behind her. Sophia turned to find Admiral Jonathan Pierce, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, walking toward her. At 58, with silver hair and the weathered face of a man who had seen both combat and Washington politics up close, Pierce carried himself with the confident gravity of someone accustomed to making decisions that affected thousands of lives. "Admiral," Sophia said, coming to attention, "we weren't expecting you until tomorrow's briefing." Pierce waved away the formality. "At ease, Colonel. I decided to come early, see the operation in its natural state before everyone puts on their presentation faces." He moved to stand beside her at the railing, looking down at the busy development floor. "Navy SEAL working with an Army Ranger on the Somalia extraction protocol," he observed, pointing to one team. "Air Force PJ collaborating with a Marine recon on the medical evacuation sequence. Army Delta operator refining infiltration tactics with a Coast Guard specialist." He shook his head in amazement. 2 years ago, this level of integration would have been unthinkable. The turf wars alone would have made it impossible. Sophia nodded, understanding the significance of what they were witnessing. "We found that once we eliminated rank insignia and service branch identifiers inside the development center, people started evaluating ideas based on their effectiveness rather than their source." Pierce studied her with newfound appreciation. "Simple but brilliant. You've created a meritocracy of ideas." It seemed the logical approach. The enemy doesn't care what uniform you wear. Why should we when developing tactics to defeat them? Pierce continued to observe the activity below. "The Joint Chiefs have reviewed your quarterly results. 17 special operations in the past 6 months conducted using your protocols. 0 casualties. 100% mission success rate." He turned to face her directly. "Those numbers are unprecedented, Colonel. In the history of special operations, we've never seen that level of effectiveness." Sophia accepted the praise with professional composure. "The credit belongs to the team, sir. Both the developers here and the operators in the field. We've simply created a system that values actual experience over theoretical models." Pierce nodded thoughtfully. "The Reyes doctrine in action. Those who face the bullets should shape the tactics." Sophia smiled slightly. "I never actually said that, sir. Perhaps not in those exact words, but it's become the guiding principle of your command. And it's spreading. Even conventional forces are beginning to adopt elements of your approach." He gestured for her to walk with him. "That's actually why I'm here a day early. The Joint Chiefs have been discussing the future of tactical development across the entire military, not just special operations." They walked along the observation deck, passing windows that looked down on various development and simulation centers. "What you've built here has proven so effective that there's growing consensus we should expand it," Pierce continued. "The President has asked me to discuss the possibility of you taking on a broader role." Sophia listened carefully, sensing the significance of this conversation. "What kind of role, sir?" Pierce stopped walking and turned to face her. "We're creating a new position, Director of Unified Tactical Development. The role would give you authority over tactical protocol development for all U.S. military operations. Conventional forces, special operations, everything." He let that sink in for a moment. It would mean promotion to full colonel, with a direct reporting line to the Secretary of Defense and the Joint Chiefs. You'd be responsible for implementing the Reyes Doctrine military-wide. The scope of what Pierce was suggesting was staggering. Tactical development for the entire military had traditionally been siloed within individual branches, each with their own doctrines, traditions, and institutional biases. Unifying that process under a single command would represent the most significant restructuring of military planning in decades. "That's a considerable expansion of authority, sir," Sophia said carefully. Pierce nodded. "It is, and it won't come without resistance. There are traditional power centers that will fight to maintain the status quo. Generals who believe their branch should maintain autonomy over tactical development. Political interests that benefit from the current system." His expression grew more serious. "But the numbers don't lie, Colonel. Your approach is saving lives and improving effectiveness. The President believes those results should be available to every service member, not just Special Operations Forces." Sophia looked back out at the development floor, considering the implications. "I would need to select my own leadership team," she said. "People who understand the philosophy behind what we're doing, not just the technical aspects." "Granted," Pierce replied immediately. "And I would need authority to implement changes without having to navigate traditional approval chains. The current system of committees and review boards is precisely what prevented field-informed tactics from being implemented in the first place." Pierce hesitated only briefly. "That will be more challenging, but yes. The directive would give you authority to implement tactical protocols subject only to Secretary of Defense approval." Sophia nodded, her mind already processing the challenges and opportunities such a position would present. "When would this take effect?" "The President wants to announce it at the National Security Conference next week. You'd assume the role immediately thereafter." Before Sophia could respond, an urgent notification sounded on her secure phone. She checked the message, her expression changing immediately. "Excuse me, Admiral. There's a situation developing that requires my attention." Pierce nodded. "Of course. We can continue this discussion later." Sophia moved quickly to the command center, where displays showed a special operations mission in progress halfway around the world. Captain Diana Chen was already there, coordinating with the tactical support team. "Status?" Sophia asked, scanning the displays. "Delta team in Niger, Colonel," Chen reported. "Extraction operation for the ambassador's security team. They've encountered unexpected resistance, local militia forces with equipment we didn't know they had." Sophia studied the tactical display showing the team's position in the developing threat. "They're using our Sahel Region Protocol 7? "Yes, ma'am. But the situation has elements we didn't account for in that protocol. The militia has Chinese-manufactured anti-aircraft capabilities that weren't in our intelligence assessment." Sophia's mind raced through the implications. The extraction plan included helicopter support that would now be vulnerable to these weapons. 18 lives hung in the balance. The Delta team and the security personnel they were extracting. "Get me a direct line to the team leader," she ordered. Seconds later, the secure communication link connected. "This is Valor Actual," came the terse voice of the Delta team commander. The sounds of sporadic gunfire could be heard in the background. "Valor Actual, this is Director Reyes at JTDC. I understand you've encountered unexpected anti-aircraft capabilities." There was a brief pause. "Affirmative, Director. Chinese FN-16 manpads. At least 3 that we've identified. Our extraction plan is no longer viable." Sophia turned to a nearby workstation and pulled up the tactical simulation system. "I'm developing a modified extraction sequence. Stand by." Her fingers flew across the interface, adjusting parameters, calculating risk factors, developing alternatives. This was where her experience translated into life-saving action, the ability to rapidly adapt protocols to changing conditions based on actual field knowledge. "Valor Actual, implement the following modifications," she said, transmitting the revised tactical plan. "Secondary extraction point Delta, approach vector changed, to come in from the northeast using terrain masking. We'll have electronic countermeasures online in 3 minutes to suppress their targeting systems." There was another pause as the team leader reviewed the modifications, Understood, Director. Proceeding to secondary extraction point now. Admiral Pierce had entered the command center quietly and stood watching as Sophia directed the operation. Around her, the tactical support team moved with practiced efficiency, each person focused on their specific role in supporting the mission. For the next 45 minutes, Sophia remained in constant communication with the Delta team, making real-time adjustments as the situation evolved. When unexpected civilian traffic blocked one evacuation route, she immediately calculated an alternative. When local police forces unexpectedly appeared, she developed a non-violent diversion strategy. Finally, the welcome transmission came through. Director, this is Valor Actual. All packages secured. Extraction complete. 0 casualties. Proceeding to friendly territory now. A quiet cheer went through the command center. 18 people would be coming home safely because of the protocols developed here, and Sophia's ability to adapt them to changing conditions. As the tactical support team began their post-operation procedures, Admiral Pierce approached Sophia. "That's what we need throughout the entire military," he said quietly. "The ability to adapt proven protocols to real-world conditions in real time. To save lives through superior tactical development." Sophia nodded, the adrenaline of the operation still coursing through her system. "It's what we built this command to do, sir. And it's what the new Unified Tactical Development Directorate will do for all military operations," Pierce replied. "Not just special forces, but every service member in harm's way." He extended his hand. "So, Colonel Reyes, can I tell the President you accept the position?" Sophia looked around the command center, at the team that had just helped save 18 lives, at the systems they had developed to make the impossible routine. "Yes, sir," she said, shaking his hand. "I accept." The National Security Conference was held in the grand ballroom of a Washington hotel, with hundreds of military leaders, defense officials, and security experts in attendance. The President's announcement of the new Unified Tactical Development Directorate and Sophia's appointment as its first director sent ripples of surprise through the assembled crowd. The reception afterward was a study in contrasts. Some officers approached Sophia with genuine congratulations, impressed by the results her command had achieved. Others kept their distance, their expressions revealing concern about what these changes might mean for traditional power structures and established ways of doing things. Secretary of Defense Harrison found Sophia in a quiet corner, momentarily away from the stream of well-wishers and skeptics. "Quite the reaction to your appointment," Harrison observed, nodding toward a group of senior officers, engaged in intense discussion while glancing in their direction. "I expected nothing less," Sophia replied. "Change on this scale will always create resistance." Harrison smiled. "You've handled worse than a few uncomfortable cocktail conversations." "Much worse," Sophia agreed. "Though in some ways battlefield opposition is more straightforward. The enemy's objectives are clear." "Speaking of opposition," Harrison said, lowering her voice, "General Lawrence has been lobbying Congress to limit the authority of your new directorate. He's arguing that each service branch should maintain autonomy over tactical development." Sophia nodded, unsurprised. General William Lawrence was a traditionalist who had risen through the ranks by following established doctrine to the letter. The idea of unified tactical development threatened everything he stood for. "His approach cost lives in the Andarko operation," Sophia said quietly. "The very protocols that led to my team's casualties came from his command." Harrison's eyebrows rose slightly. "I wasn't aware of that connection. It's not something I've discussed publicly. But yes, the tactical failures of Operation Sovereign Shield were directly linked to protocols developed under Lawrence's supervision." The Secretary considered this information carefully. "That puts his opposition in a different light. Still, he has significant influence with the Armed Services Committee. We need to be prepared for political resistance alongside the institutional kind." Sophia nodded. "Results will speak for themselves, Madam Secretary, just as they did at Fort Braxton and Fort Braddock." Harrison smiled. "I'm counting on it, Colonel." As the evening progressed, Sophia found herself approached by an unexpected figure, Lieutenant General Marcus Sullivan, now serving as Vice Chief of Staff of the Army. It had been nearly 2 years since that fateful day at Fort Braxton, when Sullivan had witnessed the revelation of Sophia's Medal of Honor. "Congratulations on the appointment, Colonel," Sullivan said, his voice carrying the same commanding presence it always had. "The President couldn't have chosen a more qualified person." "Thank you, sir," Sophia replied. "That means a great deal coming from you." Sullivan glanced around to ensure they wouldn't be overheard. "You should know that not everyone shares my assessment. There are influential voices arguing that tactical development should remain within traditional structures." "General Lawrence," Sophia said. "Not a question, but a statement." Sullivan nodded. "Among others. They're concerned about what they're calling, quote, the concentration of tactical authority. What they're really concerned about is change," Sophia observed, "the disruption of established power dynamics." "Perhaps," Sullivan agreed, "but they have legitimate questions as well. Your approach has proven extraordinarily effective for special operations. Will it translate to conventional forces with their different operational parameters?" Quote, It was a fair question, and Sophia appreciated Sullivan's directness. "The core principle translates perfectly," she replied. "Tactical development should be informed by field experience, tested rigorously in realistic simulations, and continuously refined based on actual results. That applies whether we're talking about a Delta team extraction or a conventional battalion maneuver." Sullivan studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Well said. And for what it's worth, I believe you're right. I've seen the results firsthand." He extended his hand. "The Army will support your directorate fully, Colonel. You have my word on that." As Sullivan departed, Sophia was approached by a young lieutenant she didn't recognize. The woman stood at attention with perfect military bearing. "Colonel Reyes," she said formally. "Lieutenant Emma Vasquez, ma'am. I served under Captain James Foster in the 75th Ranger Regiment." Sophia's attention sharpened at the mention of Foster, her fellow Sovereign Shield survivor. "At ease, Lieutenant. How is Captain Foster these days?" "Very well, ma'am. He speaks of you often. In fact, he's the reason I wanted to meet you tonight." The lieutenant hesitated, seeming to gather her courage. 3 months ago, our unit implemented your advanced urban extraction protocol during an operation in East Africa. We encountered a situation almost identical to what you described in the protocol briefing. Multiple hostile forces, limited visibility, civilians in the vicinity. She stood a little straighter. "Because of your protocol, we were prepared. We completed the mission with 0 casualties on either side. 27 people came home who might not have otherwise, including myself." Sophia was silent for a moment, absorbing the impact of the lieutenant's words. "Thank you for telling me this, Lieutenant. This is exactly why we developed those protocols." Vasquez nodded earnestly. "That's what Captain Foster said you'd say. He also said to tell you that this is how we honor them, the ones who didn't come back. By making sure others do." As the lieutenant departed, Sophia felt a familiar weight in her chest. The bittersweet recognition that the protocols developed from the losses of Operation Sovereign Shield were now saving lives across the military. The 6 who hadn't come back were still making a difference. The following morning, Sophia arrived at the Pentagon to find her new office, a spacious suite befitting the Director of Unified Tactical Development. Her staff had already begun the process of setting up operations, with displays showing active military deployments around the world and the tactical protocols being employed in each theater. Captain Diana Chen, now promoted to Major and serving as Sophia's Chief of Staff, met her at the door with a data tablet. "Your schedule for the day, Colonel," Chen said, handing her the device. "The Joint Chiefs have requested a briefing on implementation timelines. After that, you have meetings with each service branch's tactical development leads." Sophia scanned the schedule, noting the busy day ahead. "And General Lawrence? Has he requested a meeting?" Chen shook her head. "No, ma'am, but he's scheduled testimony before the Armed Services Committee tomorrow. The topic is preserving service autonomy in tactical development." Sophia nodded, understanding the implied challenge. "We'll need to prepare our own congressional briefing. Data-driven, focused on results, casualty reductions, mission success rates, resource efficiency. Already in progress," Chen confirmed. "We've compiled comparative analyses showing the performance improvements from your protocols across all operational theaters." Sophia smiled slightly. "Efficient as always, Major." As they walked through the outer office, Sophia noted the diverse team already at work, officers from every branch, technical specialists, simulation experts, all focused on the mission of developing the most effective tactical protocols possible. "How's the integration proceeding?" she asked Chen. "Better than expected with most branches. The Navy and Air Force tactical teams have been particularly receptive. Army is coming along. Marines are—" She paused, searching for a diplomatic term. "Being Marines," Sophia finished for her. Tradition-bound and skeptical of change. Chen nodded. "Yes, ma'am. Though they were impressed by the results from the Somalia operation last month." "Results always speak louder than rhetoric," Sophia observed. "Keep focusing on the data. Show them how these changes translate to lives saved and missions accomplished." As they reached Sophia's private office, Chen hesitated. "There's one more thing, Colonel. A personal matter." She handed Sophia a small package. "This arrived for you this morning. Security has cleared it." Sophia accepted the package with a questioning look. "Thank you, Major. That will be all for now. Let me know when the Joint Chiefs are ready for our briefing." Alone in her office, Sophia opened the package carefully. Inside was a small wooden box with a simple engraving on the lid. "Sovereign Shield." Her heart beat faster as she lifted the lid. Inside lay 6 small stones, each with a name engraved upon it. The names of the team members who hadn't returned from that fateful mission 4 years ago. Beneath the stones was a handwritten note from Lieutenant James Foster, now Captain Foster. "These are from the extraction point where we lost them. I've carried them with me since that day. Now they belong where they can do the most good, with the person who's ensuring their sacrifice continues to save others. Dash J.F." Sophia carefully arranged the stones on her desk, placing them where she could see them every day. A reminder of why this work mattered. Why the politics, the resistance, the institutional challenges were all worth facing. Her secure phone chimed with a notification. A special operations team in the Philippines was implementing one of her protocols in a hostage rescue operation. The mission was proceeding exactly as the protocol had outlined, with the team reporting perfect execution and minimal risk. As she monitored the operation's progress, Sophia reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From being ordered to stand down at Fort Braxton to directing tactical development for the entire U.S. military. From being dismissed as irrelevant to implementing changes that were saving lives around the world. The Presidential Medal of Honor that had revealed her true identity that day remained in its case, a symbol of past valor. But her current work represented something even more significant, the transformation of hard-won experience into protection for those who serve now and would serve in the future. When the Philippine operation concluded successfully, with all hostages rescued and the team reporting 0 casualties, Sophia sent a brief message of congratulations to the team leader. Then she prepared for her briefing with the Joint Chiefs, gathering the data that would help overcome the resistance to change. The path forward wouldn't be easy. Institutional resistance, political maneuvering, and traditional thinking would create obstacles at every turn. But Sophia had faced worse odds and emerged successful. And she wasn't alone. The team she had built, officers like Major Chen, who understood the mission and believed in the approach, would help implement the changes needed to make every service member safer and more effective. As she stood to leave for the Joint Chiefs briefing, Sophia's gaze fell once more on the 6 stones on her desk. The names engraved upon them represented not just loss, but purpose. Not just sacrifice, but motivation. "This is how we honor them," Lieutenant Vasquez had said, "by making sure others come home." That was the true meaning of the Reyes Doctrine. Not just a military philosophy or a tactical approach, but a commitment to those who served. A promise that their lives would be protected by the best possible preparation, the most effective protocols, the most thorough training. A promise that no life would be lost due to outdated thinking or institutional pride. And as Sophia walked toward the briefing that would help fulfill that promise, she carried with her not just the authority of her position, but the weight of that responsibility. The responsibility to ensure that every person who put on a uniform and went into harm's way had the best possible chance of coming home again. That was worth fighting for. Worth facing down generals and politicians. Worth challenging tradition and institutional resistance. The quiet major with the Presidential Medal of Honor had found her true calling, and the military would be forever changed because of it. 3 years had passed since the establishment of the Unified Tactical Development Directorate. What had begun as a revolutionary concept had evolved into the backbone of American military effectiveness. Colonel Sophia Reyes stood at the podium in the Pentagon briefing room, presenting the annual operational assessment to an audience that included the Secretary of Defense, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and congressional leadership from both parties. The data displayed behind her told a story more powerful than any rhetoric could convey. Overall casualty rates down 63% across all branches. Mission success rates up 58%. Resource efficiency improved by 41%. Lives saved, objectives achieved, threats neutralized, all with fewer losses and greater precision than ever before in military history. "These aren't just statistics," Sophia said, her quiet voice carrying throughout the silent room. "Each percentage point represents real people. Service members who came home to their families because they had the right protocols, the right training, and the right tactical approach for their mission." She advanced to the next slide, showing a global map with indicators of successful operations conducted under Unified Tactical Development Protocols. In the past year alone, UDT protocols have been implemented in 347 operations across 62 countries. From full-scale combat deployments to humanitarian relief efforts, from hostage rescues to disaster response, our approach has proven effective across the entire spectrum of military operations. Secretary of Defense Harrison nodded with satisfaction. The success of the Directorate had become the signature achievement of her tenure, despite the intense opposition it had initially faced. "What about the resistance from traditional power centers?" asked Senator James Montgomery, chairman of the Armed Services Committee. "Has that subsided as the results have become clear?" Sophia considered the question carefully. The political battles had been almost as challenging as the tactical ones. "There will always be resistance to change, Senator," she replied diplomatically. "But the data speaks for itself. When commanders see their personnel coming home safely after successfully completing their missions, operational philosophy becomes secondary to results." Montgomery nodded, apparently satisfied with the answer. But General William Lawrence, still a powerful voice despite his failed attempts to dismantle the Directorate, was not so easily placated. "These impressive statistics primarily reflect special operations and limited deployments," Lawrence said, his tone suggesting he was identifying a fatal flaw. "The real test would be a large-scale conventional conflict, which thankfully we haven't faced during this experimental period." The room tensed at Lawrence's characterization of the Directorate as experimental, after 3 years of proven success. But Sophia remained composed. "With respect, General, UDT protocols have been implemented in brigade-level exercises, simulating full-scale conventional warfare," she replied, advancing to data specifically addressing his concern. "The results show the same pattern of improvement we've seen in actual operations. Reduced casualties, increased effectiveness, better resource utilization." She highlighted specific examples on the display. The Red Flag exercise last fall pitted a conventional Army brigade using traditional tactical doctrine against an identical brigade using UDT protocols. The UDT brigade achieved all objectives with 71% fewer simulated casualties. Lawrence opened his mouth to object, but Admiral Jonathan Pierce, now in his second term as chairman of the Joint Chiefs, intervened. "The results are conclusive, General Lawrence," Pierce said firmly. "Every objective measure indicates that the Unified Tactical Development approach is superior to traditional methods. This shouldn't be surprising. Basing tactical development on actual field experience rather than theoretical models is simply logical." The remainder of the briefing proceeded without further challenges, as Sophia outlined the Directorate's plans for the coming year. When it concluded, the room emptied quickly, with officials hurrying to their next appointments. Secretary Harrison lingered behind, waiting until they were alone before speaking. "Nicely handled, Colonel," she said with a small smile. "Though I suspect General Lawrence will continue his resistance until retirement forces him to stop." Sophia nodded. "Some people are more committed to tradition than effectiveness, Madam Secretary." "Indeed, but his influence is waning as your results become increasingly undeniable." Harrison gathered her materials. "The President is extremely pleased with the Directorate's performance. There's talk of creating a permanent installation, the Unified Tactical Development Center, to institutionalize your approach beyond any individual leadership. The idea of permanently embedding the Reyes Doctrine into military structure was both gratifying and humbling. What had begun as a response to personal tragedy was becoming a fundamental shift in how America protected its service members and accomplished its military objectives. That would ensure the approach outlasts any single person's tenure, Sophia observed. Precisely, Harrison agreed. Which brings me to a related matter. The President is considering you for promotion to Brigadier General, the youngest female general in modern military history. Sophia absorbed this news with characteristic composure. I'm honored by the consideration, Madam Secretary. You've earned it, Harrison replied. Not just through the success of the Directorate, but through your leadership during several critical operations. The Damascus extraction last month, in particular, impressed everyone at the highest levels. The Damascus operation had been especially challenging, a rapidly deteriorating situation requiring real-time tactical adjustments that saved 37 lives under nearly impossible conditions. Sophia had personally directed the operation from the UDT Command Center, drawing on her field experience to guide the team through unprecedented circumstances. When will the decision be made? Sophia asked. Within the next few weeks. The nomination is being prepared now. Harrison checked her watch. I have to go, but we'll discuss this further at tomorrow's security briefing. After the secretary departed, Sophia returned to her office to find Major Diana Chen, now Lieutenant Colonel Chen, waiting with an update on current operations. All teams operating within normal parameters, Chen reported, handing Sophia a data tablet. The Somalia Peacekeeping Force is implementing the revised community engagement protocol with excellent results. Tensions in the region have decreased measurably since implementation began. Sophia reviewed the data with satisfaction. The Somalia protocols represented a different kind of tactical development, focusing on conflict prevention rather than combat effectiveness. It was an extension of the Reyes Doctrine into new territory, applying the same principles of field-informed development to peacekeeping operations. And the congressional briefing materials? Sophia asked. Completed and distributed to all committee members, Chen confirmed. Senator Montgomery's staff has requested additional data on resource efficiency metrics. We've provided it along with comparative analyses showing cost savings across all branches. Sophia nodded approvingly. The political aspects of her role required as much tactical thinking as the operational ones. Providing Congress with clear, compelling data helps secure the funding and authority necessary for the Directorate to function effectively. There's one more thing, Chen added, her tone shifting slightly. Captain Foster called. He's in Washington for the Joint Special Operations Conference and would like to meet this evening if you're available. Sophia hadn't seen James Foster in nearly a year. As one of only 2 survivors of Operation Sovereign Shield, Foster remained a living connection to the mission that had shaped her approach to tactical development. Tell him I'll meet him at the usual place at 1900 hours, Sophia replied. The usual place was a small coffee shop near the National Mall, far enough from the Pentagon to provide privacy but public enough to avoid attracting attention. Foster was already seated at a corner table when Sophia arrived, his prosthetic leg stretched out comfortably in front of him. At 38, Foster had aged well. The traumatic experiences of Sovereign Shield had left their mark in the lines around his eyes and the premature gray at his temples. But his posture remained military perfect, and his gaze clear and focused. Colonel, he said with a warm smile, standing to greet her. Or should I be practicing general already? Word travels fast in special operations circles. Sophia smiled as they sat down. Nothing's official yet. And it's still just Sophia when it's just us, James. Foster nodded, then studied her face carefully. You look tired. Running the entire military's tactical development taking its toll? Just busy, Sophia replied. We're implementing new protocols across 17 operational theaters simultaneously. Plus the congressional oversight, interagency coordination, and the usual Pentagon politics. Foster grinned. So a typical Tuesday for the woman who revolutionized military tactics. Their coffee arrived, and they spent a few minutes catching up on personal matters before Foster's expression grew more serious. I'm not just in town for the conference, he said, lowering his voice slightly. There's something you should know about Operation Kingfisher. Sophia's attention sharpened immediately. Kingfisher was the code name for a highly classified special operations mission currently in development, a potential hostage rescue in a region where traditional tactical approaches had repeatedly failed. "What about it?" she asked carefully. "General Lawrence is trying to bypass your directorate," Foster said bluntly. "He's assembled a parallel planning team using old-school protocols, the same kind that got our teammates killed in Sovereign Shield." Sophia absorbed this information without visible reaction, but internally she was calculating the implications. Lawrence's opposition to her directorate was well known, but actively undermining operational planning represented a dangerous escalation. "How did you learn this?" she asked. "Two of my former teammates were recruited for the planning team," Foster explained. "They recognized the tactical approach as prowess doctrine and reached out to me privately. They're concerned about unnecessary risk to the operators and the hostages." This was precisely the kind of situation Sophia's directorate had been created to prevent. High-risk operations planned without the benefit of field-validated protocols. The potential for unnecessary casualties was significant. "Thank you for bringing this to my attention," Sophia said. "I'll address it immediately." Foster nodded, relieved. "I knew you would. Those hostages deserve the best possible chance for survival, not to be pawns in Lawrence's institutional power play." Their conversation shifted to lighter topics, but Sophia's mind was already developing a response strategy. By the time they parted ways, she had formulated a plan that would protect both the operation and the directorate's authority. The following morning, Sophia requested an immediate meeting with Secretary Harrison and Admiral Pierce. Within an hour, they were gathered in the Secretary's secure conference room. "General Lawrence has established a parallel planning team for Operation Kingfisher," Sophia explained without preamble. "They're developing tactical protocols outside the UDT framework, potentially putting both operators and hostages at unnecessary risk." Harrison's expression darkened. "That's a direct violation of the Unified Tactical Development Directive. All special operations protocols must go through your directorate." Admiral Pierce looked equally troubled. "Lawrence is playing a dangerous game. Kingfisher is already high risk without adding procedural confusion." Sophia laid out her proposed response. "Rather than confronting Lawrence directly, which would likely escalate the situation, I suggest we incorporate his team into our planning process. Invite them to present their approach alongside the UDT protocols in a comparative analysis briefing." Pierce caught on immediately. "Let the data speak for itself. When both approaches are evaluated side by side, the superior tactical methodology will be evident to everyone involved." "Exactly," Sophia confirmed. "No accusations, no turf battles, just objective evaluation of which approach provides the best chance of success with minimal risk." Harrison nodded approvingly. "Tactically sound, politically astute. Make it happen." 3 days later, the comparative analysis briefing took place in the Pentagon's Secure Operations Center. General Lawrence arrived with his planning team, clearly expecting a confrontation. Instead, they found a professional, data-driven environment where both tactical approaches would be evaluated based on objective criteria. Sophia began the session with characteristic composure. "Gentlemen, today we'll be conducting a comparative analysis of two distinct tactical approaches to Operation Kingfisher. The goal is simple. Determine which methodology offers the highest probability of success with the lowest acceptable risk." She gestured to the advanced simulation system that dominated the center of the room. "We'll run identical scenarios using both tactical protocols. All variables will remain constant except for the tactical approach itself. The results will be measured against established metrics for mission success and personnel safety." Lawrence frowned, clearly unhappy with this unexpected development, but with senior leadership present he had little choice but to participate. "My team has developed a sound tactical approach based on established doctrine," he said stiffly. "We're confident it will prove effective." "I'm sure you are," Sophia replied neutrally. "Let's put both approaches to the test." What followed was a methodical, data-driven comparison that left no room for subjective interpretation. The simulation system, developed by the UDT Directorate specifically for protocol evaluation, created a hyper-realistic recreation of the operational environment complete with all known variables and contingencies. When the first simulation ended, the results were displayed for all to see. The UDT protocol had achieved the primary objective hostage rescue, with 0 operator casualties and minimal collateral impact. Lawrence's approach had also achieved the objective, but with 3 operator casualties and significant collateral damage. "Let's run it again with modified environmental conditions," Sophia suggested. Nighttime insertion, adverse weather, increased hostile presence. The second simulation produced even more dramatic results. Under challenging conditions, the UDT protocol maintained effectiveness with minimal risk adjustment. Lawrence's approach resulted in mission failure with multiple casualties. By the 5th simulation, with various conditions and contingencies tested, the pattern was undeniable. The UDT protocols consistently outperformed the traditional approach across all metrics. Lawrence's planning team looked increasingly uncomfortable as the evidence mounted. Several of them were exchanging glances that suggested they were reconsidering their position. Admiral Pierce finally broke the silence. "I believe the data speaks for itself, General Lawrence. The UDT protocols clearly offer superior effectiveness and safety. I'm directing that Operation Kingfisher proceed using Colonel Reyes's tactical approach exclusively." Lawrence's face flushed with barely contained anger, but he recognized defeat when he saw it. "Yes, Admiral," he replied stiffly, "though I maintain reservations about departing from established doctrine." "Your reservations are noted," Pierce said firmly. "But operational decisions will be based on demonstrated effectiveness, not doctrinal preference." As the meeting adjourned, one of Lawrence's planners, a young major with combat experience in 3 theaters, approached Sophia discreetly. "Colonel Reyes," he said quietly, "I'd like to request transfer to your directorate. What I've seen today, it's clearly the future of tactical development." Sophia studied him thoughtfully. "Report to Lieutenant Colonel Chen tomorrow at 0800. We'll discuss your qualifications and potential role." The major nodded gratefully before departing. Sophia noted with interest that 2 other members of Lawrence's team were watching this exchange with evident interest. The tide was turning, even among those initially aligned with traditional approaches. Secretary Harrison joined Sophia as the room cleared. "Masterfully handled," she observed. "No confrontation, no accusations, just irrefutable data that made your case more effectively than any argument could have." "The Reyes doctrine in action," Sophia replied. "Let the results speak for themselves." Harrison smiled. "The President has signed your promotion orders. The ceremony is scheduled for next week." Brigadier General Reyes has a nice ring to it, doesn't it? 2 weeks later, Operation Kingfisher was executed using the UDT protocols that had proven superior in simulation. The mission was a complete success. All hostages rescued, 0 operator casualties, minimal collateral impact. The official after-action report specifically credited the tactical approach developed by the Unified Tactical Development Directorate for the operation's effectiveness. General Lawrence announced his retirement the following day. The promotion ceremony was held in the Pentagon courtyard on a crisp autumn morning. The audience included the highest levels of military and civilian leadership, along with representatives from every branch of service. In the front row sat Captain James Foster and Lieutenant Colonel Diana Chen, alongside the families of the fallen Sovereign Shield team members. The first time their sacrifice had been publicly acknowledged, though the operation itself remained classified. As Secretary Harrison pinned the star of a brigadier general to Sophia's uniform, she spoke of transformation and legacy. "What General Reyes has accomplished goes beyond tactical innovation," Harrison said. "She has fundamentally changed how we prepare our service members for the challenges they face. She has created a culture where effectiveness is valued above tradition, where field experience guides development, and where the safety of our personnel is never sacrificed for doctrinal purity." After the formal ceremony, Sophia spent time with the families of her fallen teammates. For years, they had known only that their loved ones died in service to their country, the details of Operation Sovereign Shield hidden behind classification barriers. Now, while the operation itself remained secret, they could at least see how their sacrifice had sparked changes that were saving countless other lives. "Miguel would be so proud," said Elena Sanchez, widow of Captain Miguel Sanchez. "He always said the most dangerous phrase in military planning was, 'We've always done it this way.'" Sophia smiled at the memory. Sanchez had indeed been a vocal critic of outdated tactical thinking. "His perspective lives on in every protocol we develop," she assured Elena. "His experience continues to save lives every day." Similar conversations with each family, brought both tears and healing. The knowledge that their loved ones' deaths had not been in vain, that their sacrifice had catalyzed changes protecting future generations of service members, provided a measure of comfort previously unavailable to them. When the last family had departed, Sophia found herself alone with Foster and Chen, the three of them standing in the now empty courtyard. "I never expected any of this," Sophia admitted quietly. "That day at Fort Braxton, when Hargrove ordered me to stand down, I was just trying to complete my assessment mission." Foster nodded. "And now you're Brigadier General Reyes, the youngest female general in modern military history and the architect of the most significant tactical revolution in decades." Chen smiled. "The quiet major with the Medal of Honor who changed everything." Sophia looked at them both. Foster, who had shared the trauma and triumph of Sovereign Shield. Chen, who had once been among those dismissing her at Fort Braxton, but had become her most trusted colleague in building the directorate. "We carry them with us," she said simply, "in everything we do." Later that evening, Sophia stood in her new office, the general's star still feeling unfamiliar on her uniform. The 6 stones from the Sovereign Shield extraction point remained on her desk, now accompanied by a framed photograph taken just before the mission. 8 young operators, full of confidence and purpose, unaware that only 2 would return. Her secure phone chimed with an incoming message. A special operations team in Southeast Asia had just successfully completed a high-risk extraction using UDT protocols. All team members safe, all objectives achieved. Another chime. A peacekeeping force in Africa reporting reduced tensions following implementation of community engagement protocols developed by her directorate. A third notification. The Unified Tactical Development Center had been officially authorized by executive order, ensuring the approach Sophia had pioneered would continue regardless of individual leadership changes. The Reyes Doctrine had become more than a tactical philosophy. It had become a fundamental shift in how America protected those who served and accomplished its military objectives. What had begun in tragedy had transformed into a legacy of lives saved and missions accomplished. As Sophia prepared to leave for the day, she took one last look at the photograph on her desk, the faces of those whose sacrifice had made all of this possible. They had given everything, and she had ensured their sacrifice continued to protect others long after their names had faded from public memory. The underestimated major with the Presidential Medal of Honor had become a general whose doctrine would shape military operations for generations to come. The quiet observer who had been ordered to stand down had risen to transform how America prepared its warriors for battle, and in doing so, she had created the most fitting memorial possible for those who had fallen. A legacy measured not in stone monuments but in lives saved, in service members returning home to their families, in missions accomplished without unnecessary sacrifice. That was the true power of recognizing capability regardless of its package, of looking beyond appearances to see the strength that often remained hidden until the moment it was needed most. The quiet woman who changed everything had found her purpose, and the military and the nation it served would never be the same. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.